So what are your thoughts on giants in scripture? Well, we have a lot of evidence for giants, obviously, in scripture, including the Nephilim, David and Goliath. There's a bunch of different things in scripture that point us to them and show us that there's these giant beings that have these different reasons for being there. But I've personally never seen a giant in real life today. So did they exist at one point? And is there evidence for that? Well, our friend Joel Kramer over on Expedition Bible has done a whole video about this, so I wanted to react to his video and kind of see what he says about this, because he's got some cool things to say. So let's jump in. Let's go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Expedition Bible. I'm Joel Kramer. Today I want to cover a very interesting subject. The Bible talks about giants and the descendants of giants having lived in the biblical land in ancient times. And so is there anything that's been found in the archaeological record that provides evidence for these historical giants?
And this is why I love Joel so much. Again, I've never met Joel. I've never seen Joel in person. I don't think he even knows I exist. But this is why I love Joel, because he thinks... oh, sorry. I'm dying a little bit. 1 second. All right. This is why I love Joel, because he thinks exactly like I do. He thinks logically about the situations. He thinks, where does the evidence lie? And what is exactly happening in this world? If giants did exist, then the archaeological evidence should be there somewhere. So let's take a second. Let's look for it and look at it from the lens using the Bible as a treasure map to get there. I love the way that he thinks about this. So let's jump in.
In this video, we're going to look at a discovery that was made in Israel of a hoard of giant metal weapons. This huge spearhead that is 66 centimeters long was found right here where I'm standing. So in this aerial footage, you see in the background the Mediterranean Sea. You see the town of Kfar Monash, and then you see the agricultural field where in 1962 this hoard of giant metal weapons was discovered. Okay.
So this is right near the Mediterranean Sea, but it's obviously from an Old Testament area here that would have been here.
I am in the field near the Moshav Kfar Monash, and right here is where the report that came out in 1963 says that the hoard of metal objects, including tools and weapons, and including these 4 massive spearheads, according to that report, they give a map there, and this is the exact location of where that hoard was found, all the way back in 1962.
And I love this too. I love how they have spent so much time, really since the 1800s, really before that, finding these archaeological evidences of things in Israel. I love it, because every time we look at the Bible as a treasure map, every time we look at the Bible for guidance in what we should be finding, we find those things. So it proves even more that the Bible is to be trusted, that is something that we can cling to. It's just so amazing. I love it. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this video, I'd love for you to subscribe. Our goal right now is to pass Rabbi Jason Sobel in subscribers, so we need your help to do that. Thank you so much.
A local farmer was expanding his field. He was plowing new ground and exposed all these metal objects. Scholars debate about when these 4 spearheads date to. You'll see dates for them anywhere from about 4,300 years ago to 5,000 years ago, or even older.
So they're really, really old. What he's about to show us here is the Shrine of the Book. This building is the Shrine of the Book, I believe, which holds the Dead Sea Scrolls here.
The tools and weapons from this discovery are currently on display in the Israel Museum,
which is right next to the Shrine of the Book here. The Israel Museum holds a lot of really cool stuff. During one of our Israel trips, I would love to go into some of these museums because they hold some really, really, really cool stuff.
So I'm here in the Israel Museum, and just up here is the hoard of tools and weapons made of copper that were found at Monash. And here we have the most impressive part of this collection, which are these 4 giant spearheads. The largest one there upside down. This is the largest spearhead ever found in the land of the Bible. Of course, it's back behind me in the display, so it doesn't look so impressive. So what I'll do is I'll cut the size of it out of cardboard just to give you an understanding of how huge it actually is.
Yeah, it's really hard to get a grasp of exactly how big it is through a lens here that's kind of distorting the image and not showing you exactly.
1963, after the study of this hoard of weapons that were found in Monash, the official journal article came out describing this. And so in this journal article, they...
Paul says, I look like a pretty big guy. Could I be part giant? For sure. I'm definitely part giant for sure. No. Dallas is like way bigger than me. Dallas is like 6'5" or something. He's huge, dude. I'm like 6'1", 6'2". He like towers over me every single time I like try to give him a hug or anything.
They give the drawings of the 4 spearheads that were found, and then they give their dimensions. So what I did is I just took those dimensions and a piece of cardboard and cut out those dimensions, because when they're back in a case and back behind me when I'm talking in the Israel Museum, they look very small. And so this will give you a better perspective of just how big they are. This is the smallest of the 4 spearheads found at Monash. It's 13 inches long, and so it is considered in the journal article as a huge spearhead. And so I went around the Israel Museum comparing the size of the smallest spearhead to the other spearheads that were displayed elsewhere. And many of the other spearheads were about this much smaller than this one, quite a bit smaller. Here is on display more spearheads from the Bronze Age.
So take a look at these like normal looking spearheads, right? And then we'll compare them to the size of these massive spearheads that we're going to look at in a second. He is also going to talk to us about how some people believe these to be decorations and how he believes that's probably not the case.
These are typical spearheads. You know, they look maybe 6 inches long, 7, 8 inches long at the most. And so this already is considered a huge spearhead. 2 more spearheads that are within a ½ inch of each other were also found, and you can see the difference in size. However, the largest spearhead that was found in the Monash hoard is this one. Now, again, I just took the length of it from the drawing.
So to give perspective to this, imagine somebody attacking Joel, right? Who's a pretty big guy, right? Imagine someone attacking Joel with this spearhead, right? Like it would like cut him in half if you could even wield it, because it's so heavy, right? It's a massive, massive spearhead. So yeah, let's talk through this.
66 centimeters, that's 26 inches. And you just see how massive this spearhead is. There is another spearhead that's only 6 centimeters smaller than this one that was found at Megiddo. So these aren't the only giant spearheads that have been found. But this is the largest one that's been found in the land of the Bible. And it's just absolutely massive. So when you're looking at this hoard of spearheads, then you start to realize what they're writing in this article and how true it is. Like, for example, the authors of the article say of these spearheads that they're the most remarkable group among the Monash finds, and they describe them as massive because that's what they are. We have a parallel of these spearheads in the biblical text. If we go to 2 Samuel chapter 21 verse 16, we're introduced to this warrior and we're given his name. His name is Ishbi-Benob, and then he's described specifically as one of the descendants of the giants, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of bronze.
Yeah, I love this measurement that they give in the Old Testament. They give this a lot, where it's like a measurement in shekels of weight, so that everybody would know exactly how much something would weigh, specifically in terms of the money that they would carry. It's really, really interesting.
Isn't that interesting? We're not given his size and his weight, but we're given the weight of his spear, and it's talking about his entire spear. Now, if we take this, the largest of the spearheads at Monash, this spearhead alone, just the head, is 5 pounds. But when it says 7 pounds in the Bible, it's talking about also the entire spear. So you got to put the shaft on this. Imagine how big that shaft, that pole must have been on a spear this big. It would have been much taller than a man. It would have weighed at least 2 pounds. It would have weighed probably much more than that. This is probably a bigger spear, a heavier spear than the one that's described in 2 Samuel 21:16.
Yeah, crazy.
This article is the authors write this: the spearheads bear signs of use, especially the heaviest, which is bent in one spot and worn in several places along the edges. Okay, so they're saying that these spears bear the evidence that they were used as spears. Despite them writing this, a little later in the article they say, they write this: spears were used in war and fighting. In the case of the Monash spears, however, their unusual size and weight would appear to be an obstacle rather than an aid to anyone carrying them.
Right. So they're saying, okay, we found these gigantic spears. Looks like they correlate with other spears that we found and how they are distressed and how they are used. However, logically, there's no way that these could actually be spears because no one would ever be able to wield them, right? Without thinking of descendants of giants or thinking about how giants would have used them.
We would like to suggest that these heavy spears may have been used in yet another way. And so they go on to suggest that these were decorative in nature. They were used as decorations. Now, why? Because they're too big to have been used by a normal-sized warrior. Okay, now you have to keep in mind that most scholars are secular, including the authors of this article. They don't believe in giants. They don't believe that giants existed and that they're historical. And therefore, they have to give another explanation for why these massive spearheads were found. And so they must be decorative. Keep in mind that earlier they had said, and especially the biggest one, had evidence for being used as a spearhead. This interpretation has to do with worldview. If you don't believe in, if you believe giants are fairy tale beings, then you're not going to interpret this as evidence of giants.
And I find this is the case with a lot of biblical things too. Like, like we see this all the time because people are like, well, people can't raise from the dead. But why is there so much evidence of Christ being raised from the dead, right? So people that are trying to think about this logically and think about it because their worldview cannot include resurrection, they try to explain all these different things in different ways. Like, why would all the apostles die for their faith if Jesus was not resurrected? Like, there's this hilarious skit, I think it's from Babylon B, where Peter gets all of the apostles together after Jesus dies, and he's like, man, Jesus died. And they're all like, yeah, man, oh, this stinks, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, I have a great idea. Let's steal his body. Let's go and run away and proclaim the gospel and do all these things. And they're all like, yeah. And they're like, what do we get out of this? Like, what's the goal of this? You know, if he wasn't the Messiah. And he's like, oh, we're all gonna die horrible deaths. And it's like, yeah, that's very true. Like, they all died horrible, horrible deaths. Like, what do they get out of this if Jesus was not the Messiah, if he was not resurrected, if all these things didn't happen, when there's so much evidence for it, including eyewitness after eyewitness after eyewitness seeing him after he died? Like, there's so many things that build up to that. And so if you do not have resurrection in your worldview, then you'll never be able to understand the resurrection because you're just going to shut it out no matter what, right? And so, yeah, Joel's definitely correct here. If you never can think of giants in your worldview, you will never think of them as a solution to a real question that you're asking in life.
because you don't believe in them. However, for those of us who do believe in the Bible and its historicity, then we know that giants existed in the ancient past, and when we find giant weapons, then using the Bible, we would interpret them, certainly I would, to be evidence for what the Bible is describing in these descendants of giants. Now, also in the article that's very interesting is this. The authors wrote, a remarkable feature of the Monash hoard were the small, thin, ridged copper plates, of which about 800 were found. We suggest that these plates are scales of armor.
Yeah, and this would, I think he's definitely going to go into this. I haven't watched this video in a long time, but I think he's definitely going to go into how this could possibly be something similar to what Goliath wore, because his armor is depicted in exactly that way.
This also has a parallel in the Bible. If we just flip back from 2 Samuel to 1 Samuel chapter 17, then we have the account of Goliath, the most famous of all the biblical giants. In verse 4 of 1 Samuel 17, we are introduced to Goliath of Gath. In verse 5, it says that Goliath of Gath was armed with a coat of mail, and that the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. This is about 125 pounds.
So remember, the spear was around 7 pounds. Now, the coat of armor is around 125 pounds of just straight up armor that you're wearing. Like, this is pretty insane.
So we have archaeologically.
So those are the plates there that would have made up the armor. So they're separated now because the plates would have made of metal, but they probably would have been woven together with some sort of cloth or something that would have woven them together right into plates. Obviously, they weren't welded or anything like that, but these plates were made so that they could be kind of stitched together as armor, if you see that.
Found at Monash this pile of 800 scales of body armor, and then we have body armor of a giant described in the biblical text. Now, very interestingly, the authors go on in the article to say this: the only parallel for the Monash scales was found at Tel Gath, where identical copper scales, also forming a package, were uncovered in the area of the city wall.
That's really, really interesting. So Tel Gath would have been the Tel at where Gath is. And again, if you haven't heard me talk about this, a Tel is when a city is kind of eroded over time, and cities begin to be built on top of one another, and then when they're abandoned, dirt kind of takes over, and it looks like almost a hill on the countryside. But when you dig into that hill, you begin to see all these different civilizations that have lived there at one point. Really, really interesting. So Tel Gath obviously would be a connection to that.
Isn't that amazing? The only other place that body armor, like the body armor found at Monash, has been found is Tel Gath, the hometown of Goliath, who is the giant in the Bible whose body armor is described for us, and we're given its weight. The interpretation of the authors of the article are very similar with the body armor as with the spearheads. They say this. They say the great number of scales found would point to several coats of mail being hidden in the Monash hoard.
Again, they're going back to their worldview. If giants can't exist, so this must have been multiple armor all put together there.
They're saying is it looks like this is one coat of armor, but it's way too many scales to be just one coat of armor. Therefore, there must be several different coats hidden within this pile of 800 scales. Now, that's one interpretation if you don't believe in giants. However, if you do believe in historical giants because they're described in the Bible, then this could be the coat of armor for a single individual who, of course, would be a giant or a descendant of the giants. So, in conclusion, here are the facts. We have archaeological discovery at Monash of these massive metal spearheads and body armor. We have a parallel of the huge spearhead found also at Megiddo. We also have a parallel of the body armor found at Monash, found at Tel Gath. We have a match. That's why I interpret this as evidence for biblical giants, because what's been found in the ground is comparable to what's described in the Bible as the weapons of these descendants of giants. Of course, a secular archaeologist, a secular interpretation is going to not consider this evidence for giants, and so in their case they interpret it as there must be several coats of armor amongst these 800 scales, and these giant spearheads must be decorative. You can make up your own mind. You can weigh the evidence yourself. As for me, I see this as a correlation between the biblical text and what was found in the ground.
So interesting. Again, I love Joel. I love what he talks about. I love the evidence here. And again, kind of tying into what we think about the Bible, right? Like, what do you think about giants? Is this something you ever thought about, or is it just like, oh no, it doesn't really affect my life, so I haven't really thought about it too much? Or it's so interesting to think about all these things in the Bible that maybe we don't really pay any mind to. Maybe we don't put too much weight on it because it's like, I don't really have to think about that because it's not part of my life day to day. Like, I don't have to go fight giants. I'm not David, right? Like, but these things did exist. Like, the Nephilim were actually like a thing, right? Giants were actually like a thing. Like, these things happen. It's, I don't know, it's so cool to me to think of the evidence, and then just to see evidence of the things that really don't apply to me too much really adds weight to the things that do apply to me, right? So when I think of like Caesarea Philippi and what Jesus did there, when I think about Capernaum, what Jesus did there, when I think about Magdala and everything that happened there, like, there are so many things that add so much weight to the evidence of the Bible and so much weight to when I read the Bible, right? Helps it to come alive for me. It helps it to really become something that I'm excited to dive into. So if you like this small portion of our live stream, you can check out the whole entire live stream over on our Patreon at patreon.com/thesnipelife. This is by far the best way to help support us and to keep us doing amazing things in the future of these videos. There's a lot of stuff we have planned, so I want you to be a part of it. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.